Guys, even though the Custodian Codex is far from being in great shape now, there still are units that can carry us to victory. In this video, we'll take a look at how exactly you can use them in your rosters, if you need to include them, and without further ado, let's dive right in. First unit is going to be the grandpa of all transports, the Land Raider. As you surely know, the Custodians have always struggled with long-range firepower, and Land Raider is one of few units we have available, and probably the only unit in the actual Codex that can solve this problem, at least partially. Partially because his last cannons and heavy bolter cannot really be trusted to deal with heavier targets if you are really relying on that unit being dead in your shooting phase in order for your turn to work out. Are a nice shooting addition to their transport capability, and that's probably why you would want to run them. Oh, it's a 10-inch moving transport, unlike our favorite Land Raider Redeemer from the Space Marine book. It's still a solid boost to the threat range that the Custodians usually have, because it's essentially like a 13-inch move. And for our less experienced viewers out there, why I'm saying 13 inches is because Land Raider moves 10 inches, you can then disembark, and using the assault ramp keyword, you can charge after that, and when you disembark, you would disembark within 3 inches of the transport, so the maximum distance your furthest model can move is 13 inches from the point where Land Raider started. Plus, with the reactive moves that are available to you in the Talents of the Emperor detachment, which is probably the most competitive one we have available, it kind of pains me to say this because it's such a bad one compared to the shield host of old. Still, the ability to move 6 inches back when someone closes up on us is very useful, especially if you run a shield captain with an infantry unit inside the Land Raider Redeemer, and then you can normal move that unit and embark them into the Land Raider, because normal move allows embarkation as well. And in combination with the shield captain, you can essentially do that twice, because the shield captain does it for free, and then you do it with your Land Raider. Of course, Land Raider still needs to be within 9 inches of that unit, enemy unit that moved, so it's quite tricky in terms of geometry, but it's in an interesting capability still. And of course, as it's the Land Raider, you get a very solid, durable hull with 16 wounds, toughness 12, and 2+ save, and potential for smoke, so cover and -1 to hit. It is a very serious kind of profile, and yes, you're paying 240 points for it, but still, you are probably getting your money's worth from this model. I can see one single Land Raider being a very powerful addition to pretty much any Custodians list if everything else falls into place. Maybe even two, but that's if you're playing on more empty tables. If the table is very crowded, it's going to be very difficult to park two and move two Land Raiders. One would be the optimal maximum. As always, I want to remind you about my Patreon 40K coaching service. If you're looking for help building your competitive rosters, preparing you for tournaments, or have any questions about your collection in general, check out the links for my Patreon in the description. Thank you. Next are my favorite Allarus Custodians, or as Anna likes to call them, Allarus guys. I love these guys. They are my favorite Terminator type in the entire game, and keep in mind that I love Grey Knights, so Brotherhood Terminators also have a special place in my heart. These guys, they're just on another level of coolness. They are tougher than normal Custodians, and they don't die to damage 3 guns or melee as easily, which is very important, and damage 3 is quite prominent nowadays in Warhammer. And obviously they have better survivability against damage 1, but that's like a marginal upgrade. They are also toughness 7, which does not sound that impressive. However, in a lot of actual real game scenarios, I found that it's like a pseudo -1 to wound almost compared to a normal Custodian, because last cannons like strength 12 don't wound these guys on 2s anymore. The quite prominent strength 6 melee, which is very popular with a lot of normal melee units, like say the Grey Knights Terminators I mentioned before, is also going to be wounding these guys on 5s instead of 4s, which is a big difference. You also have a once per game Grey Knight style teleportation, which is a useful thing to have on your Terminators, because sometimes when you disembark them from a Land Raider, and yes, you really need a Land Raider for these guys to be mobile, because that 5-inch move is not going to carry them far, obviously. And we still do not have any modifiers to the charge, even though we already have the Codex. I was hoping for something like a Dread Host detachment, where we will be able to utilize the old from Golden Light they come ability, which is what their Deep Strike used to be named, better, and we would have some modifiers, maybe rerolls available, but no. We have to rely on the good old Land Raider to carry us into battle, and the Deep Strike, the teleportation once per game we have is more for the situation where we disembark from Land Raider, we killed everything that is close by and there's just nothing else in this area, and your Allarus would just be stuck there otherwise. So you can use the teleportation, and yes, you will be you'll have to roll a 9-inch charge, which is very unlikely to go off, but it is possible. And at worst case scenario, you'll be just in another part of the board where perhaps there is more action happening. Allarus do hit hard. They still have the 5 attacks, strength 7, AP 2, damage 2 profile, and a different one for the axe, which still is worse than the spear, unfortunately, though it's significantly better. Now hitting on 2s. Yes, you do need that extra investment to buy the Land Raider, and they are probably the best unit to go into the Land Raider, to be honest. But for Custodes that are in general very expensive, the combo of Allarus plus Land Raider does not seem that astronomically expensive. You can also run Allarus as 2-man squads. I think it's not a bad idea, though for most applications this will be something that you do only when you have already built your perfect list and you have points left over, and you can upgrade, say, 1 unit of prosecutors to a 2-man Allarus squad. Thanks to their once per game ability to teleport, they essentially have like a pseudo jump up and down ability like the Caladius has. Obviously a different kind of thing, but still not bad, and could help you to use them as this tactical piece that you throw around to score secondaries. See what happens when the balanced data slate comes out and the Miniature Field Manual is updated, because I hope these guys, as well as other Custodian units, will get a discount, and if we see Allarus that are at least 5, hopefully even 10 points cheaper, though I'm probably hallucinating here, it will become very, very good, to be honest. Why they hit so hard is because they have full rerolls to wound against monsters, vehicles, and characters. That works also for their shooting, and for most intents and purposes that is essentially a full reroll to wound, because you will want to fight against those 3 types of units. And if you think like, characters, why would I want to go after characters? That is essentially any unit that has a leader attached is a character unit with a character keyword. So if you are fighting against a brick of Terminators with a character attached, that's a character unit. Yeah, of course, sometimes you will want to charge them into troops unit that doesn't have a character, and then you'll be, oh, I don't have the rerolls. But in most situations, this one is more powerful, in my opinion, than the full reroll that the Custodian Guard has, which only works on objectives. Sometimes your opponent will not have the stuff you want to kill on objectives, and that can become a problem, and the Allarus don't have that problem. They have more shooting than normal Custodes, which is great, especially if you are going up against light infantry armies with a character attached, like Sisters of Battle, which are stupidly powerful now, and you would want to have that extra shooting against them. Genestealer cults as well are a great example of what you can kill with that. Elder Guardians with a Farseer attached are a very good target for the shooting that the Allarus have, and even Necron Warriors, though those are at the probably the edge of what you would be targeting here, they are still a good target for them, especially if there is a toughness 4 2-wound model that is not in cover, so you would have AP -1 still, then the spears that have damage 2 will be actually quite efficient against that. All in all, I really like the Allarus. If they get a bit cheaper and maybe even a Land Raider gets a slight discount, or perhaps we get a fixed detachment and we have more opportunities to actually use the Allarus as they are supposed to, which is teleporting into battle and charging, then they will become even better. But for now, I think they are in top 5 best units. Next are the Custodian Guard, our trusty battle line choice. So it's an interesting one here because we don't yet know how impactful the battle line keyword is going to be. We were shown some mission rules that are in the Pariah Nexus deck, and it seems like there will be an incentive to run at least some battle line choices if they are good already, and Custodian Guard are good enough to be run like this, especially at least having one with the combination we're going to discuss about now, which is of course the well-known Kira Draxus Inquisitor combination plus 5-man Custodian Guard. If you're not aware of what this one is, essentially you are attaching an Inquisitor model to the 5-man Custodian Guard unit because they are battle line and the Inquisitor can join any Imperium battle line, and they get an 18-inch lone up on a roll of 2+ every turn. There is a chance that it doesn't work out, of course, and that would be very bad, but if it does, in most cases it will, your unit is untargetable outside of 18 inches, and that essentially gives your 5-man Custodian Guard unit a delivery method, because you will be protected from the long-range guns, and if someone goes into 18-inch range from that unit, they are very likely even closer to some other assets that you have and potentially in danger. Especially if we see that a lot of missions in the actual competitive compendium have a lot of battle line upgrades, then running maybe even more than one Custodian Guard unit could be recommended. For now, one with Draxes is a very good idea and not that expensive, because they are 5 points cheaper than the Wardens, which are the next cheapest infantry choice we have. Essentially, you can think about that as Draxes being cheaper to buy her than her actual price. As Anna likes to call it, it's girl math. Any Custodes, this unit can really fight and shoot pretty well. Obviously, fighting is much better than shooting, but still you would have the double shoot ability and full rerolls to wound if you're on an objective with their spear, so it's not bad. Especially if you have Kira in the squad, then she will get all those benefits as well. Those full rerolls to wound and lethal hits, and potentially if you really want to, you can spend 2 command points and get that +1 to wound for the Talons of the Emperor. If you're fighting a bigger, tougher unit, they will be able to go through a lot of stuff, especially if that is not -1 damage. If it's -1 damage, you will be in trouble. So all in all, they are great, they are pretty cheap, especially if we see a discount, further discount, though I doubt that we'll see that on the Custodian Guard. They are already quite inexpensive. They are more than worth it to have in your army, at least one unit with Kira, and maybe even more, again, if we see some extra buffs for battle line or just a lot of them. Next are the Wardens. My favorite Wardens, at the end of the day, probably the best infantry unit we have, because of one simple reason. It is important for Custodes to be deadly, to be great at shooting, hopefully, though that's not their shtick. However, all that double shoot and rerolls to wound thing is not as important as just activating another time. That's what you get with the durability that the Wardens bring to the table. Custodes now have serious problems with survivability because they've lost a lot of their layers of protection. They don't have the -1 to hit kata, they don't have -1 damage, they don't have the Filno Pains against mortal wounds and devastating wounds anymore. So having something that has extra survivability is very important, so that's why Wardens will probably be the main frame of your army going forward, unless there again is some big change to their rules, which we might or might not see in the future. Their survivability hangs on two things. It's -1 damage and once per game 4+ Filno Pain. Both have some limitations, so 4+ Filno Pain unfortunately needs to be activated at the start of phase, so you need to predict essentially when your opponent is going to be drawing guns or melee on you. In the fight phase it's a bit easier because the charge phase sort of indicates what's going to be happening next. With the shooting, it's a bit more difficult because your opponent can just not shoot the squad that you have turned on the 4+ Filno Pain on. Still, 4+ Filno Pain, even once per game, even with this limitation, is an incredibly powerful thing. And -1 to wound as well, though again, it's the -1 to wound that only is active when your squad is led by a character and when the attacking unit's strength is higher than your toughness. They also, unlike the Custodian Guard, have the Ancient or the Bannerman, who is still carrying the spear, so you get +1 OC for the unit, making them OC3, which is quite impressive, but you're not sacrificing any melee for that. As we know, the Custodes that survives into the next phase or into the next turn is exactly the Custodes that will prevent opponents' models from doing the same. If you're worried that with their lack of rerolls to wound or lack of double shoot they are not as good in damage output, you are sort of correct, but they still have the deadly 5 attacks at strength 7, AP2 damage 2, with potential for lethal or sustained hits, or maybe even +1 to wound if you're running Talons, or the extra critical 5s if you're running Shield Host, though I again would not recommend that. They can cut through a lot of stuff with that. You will need help with the high toughness 2+ save things, but besides that, they are good against most units in the game. You can also run them with Blade Champions to solve their problem of mobility, because Blade Champions will still allow you to have rerolls for the charge and the advance and charge ability. And on top of their durability, you can also have the 2 enhancements in the Talons of the Emperor, which is the Aegis Projector or Radiant Mantle. Aegis Projector is the one that allows you to negate 1 failed save, so just make it damage 0. Or Radiant Mantle, which is -1 to hit for any attacks originating within 12 inches, so if someone's shooting you from real close or in melee. short, it's a very sad thing that we have to rely so much on the very same unit that we have always used, and there are so few ways to play Custodes now. But yes, Wardens are the main thing, the main bulk of your army. They should be if you want to play competitively, and they are pretty good at that still. And lastly, as you have probably already guessed, is the old shooting problem solver, the Caladius Grav-Tank. It's currently priced at 215 points, which can change obviously with the new Military Field Manual, and it's a very tough tank for what it does and for what it costs. It's toughness 11, 2+ save, 5+ invulnerable save, and 14 wounds. So it's, in terms of how durable it is, it's somewhere between a normal tank and a Land Raider, which is not bad. It's closer to the Land Raider than it's to the normal tank. It moves 10 inches, actually, there's a typo there, and it has fly keywords, so it is pretty fast. Though it is quite a big tank, it still is narrow enough to fit through most terrain gaps because it doesn't have the huge sponsons that the Land Raider is rocking. But the main object of attention on this model is the Arachnus gun that you can choose for it. You can also do the Leastus, but I would not recommend it because you need anti-tank in your army, and it's a crazy anti-tank. 4 shots at 48-inch range, which is going to be enough to hit anything on the board in 99% of cases. It hits on 2s, of course, it's Custodes tank. Strength 12, AP 3, and damage D6 +2, not +1 like the last gun, +2. And you even get twin-linked and lethal hits to make sure that anything that hits the target wounds the target. You also get extra 3 shots from the small gun underneath, but that's not why we're here. It is a very good shooting profile and exactly what we need for Custodes to solve the problems of monsters, vehicles, and things like that. It's desperately what Custodes need, and this tank is reliable, durable, and deadly. So unfortunately, again, running 2 of these in the competitive list is a must-have in my humble opinion. If you're not running them, in my opinion, you're just shooting yourself in the leg. If you're like me, you're probably impatiently waiting for the new balanced data slate to drop, hoping that there will be fixes for our beloved Custodes, making them more playable than they are now, and most importantly, more fun to play. Because there are, as you can see, good units still in the Custodes book. There are some stratagems available for us to sort of extract power from those data sheets, but they are very bland, they are very boring, and that is not what Custodes should be. So hopefully this will be fixed in the future. Thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.